So, who had fun at karaoke last night? How much fun did you have? That's a lie. You had a lot more fun than that. How much fun did you have at karaoke? No, that's still not it. How much fun did you have at karaoke? There we go. Excellent. Well, you guys are some great talent up there, and I'm going to pick on some people here in a few minutes. You have more cojones than I do. I tend to think of karaoke as more of a spectator sport, which is really contrary to the theme of my talk today, so I think I need this talk as much as anyone else. But let's get started. So I want to start with a little experiment. Yeah, we're working here. Good. And what I want you to do is listen to this piece of music. It's a very short piece of music. And raise your hand if at any point you feel chills or goosebumps or anything like that, okay? And keep it raised until I tell you you can lower it, all right?
Rape murder! It's just a shadow away! It's just a shadow away! Rape murder! Yeah! It's just a shadow away! It's just a shadow away! Rape murder! It's just a shadow away! It's just a shadow away!
Oh, you feel that? Oh my gosh. That's Mary Clayton's background vocal on Rolling Stone's Give Me Shelter, and it gives me chills every time. It's just amazing. Thank you. Look around. I mean, some people put their hands down, but look around and just see how effective music is on us. This is incredible. Okay, thank you. You can lower your hands. This is an incredibly potent force. It can give us chills. It can make us laugh, make us cry. It can unlock long forgotten memories. You hear that song and it just brings you right back to that moment when your girlfriend dumped you and you're just wallowing in your sorrow, right? Floods us with emotion, and it can keep us transfixed. I remember, I used to work as a stage manager and instrument technician for a bluegrass band. Bluegrass. I grew up in New Hampshire, so that's kind of weird, right? And so I remember one time there was this move that I had to do. The lead singer was up here with his fiddle singing, and I had to come up behind him and put the harmonica in his mouth and grab his fiddle with the other hand. But one night, I was watching them, and it was just so incredible that I was completely transfixed by the music. And I realized maybe it felt like minutes, but maybe it was only a few seconds into the part where I was supposed to be out there putting the harmonica in his mouth, that they were just looping the same part because I wasn't there to do it, because I was just zoned out, just completely transfixed by the music. It can activate the same reward circuits in the brain as drugs, sex, and candy. Great song, by the way. Also, the stress circuits in the brain can release cortisol, like it did for me in that moment when I realized, oh yeah, that's my cue. It can affect our heart rate, our blood pressure, and our brains, of course. 25 years ago, scientists thought that language was on the left side of the brain, music was on the right. But our understanding has come a tremendous way since then. According to Daniel Levitin, a neuroscientist who studies music's effects on the brain, music affects every area of the brain so far studied, which is incredible. This is former Congresswoman Gabby Giffords, and after she survived a gunshot wound to the head, she had to relearn how to speak. And she did that using music therapy. Music enabled her to rewire her brain. Music can also bolster certain structures within the brain. Most notably the corpus callosum, which is the bundle of nerves that connects the left and right hemispheres of the brain. And children who play musical instruments have larger corpus callosums. They test better on tests of critical thinking skills and critical problem solving. And as everybody who took part in karaoke last night knows, singing, especially with people, in groups of people, can release oxytocin, which gets rid of anxiety, depression, feelings of loneliness, and it increases social bonding. I mean, look at how much fun we had last night. That was great. It's this incredible, incredible, potent force. This better? Okay. I'm going to take a page from Greg McEwen. Let's do a quick snap poll. Everyone remember that? Snap if your answer is yes. Okay, so how many people this morning woke up with music? All right, how many people worked out to music? How many people commuted here with some music? All right, so we're using music constantly. We use it to buoy our moods and to help us fall asleep at night. It's just a constant life-enhancing drug for us, right? We're always hooked in. But most of us don't really know how or why music works the way it does, why it affects us the way it does, why we like the songs that we do. I like to think of it as the closest thing that we rational 21st century people have to alchemy, right? It's like we've got this broth of Beatles with a pinch of Pink Floyd in there and a little dash of Hendrix and maybe some beheaded Black Sabbath bats. And that's our stew for the day. But we have no idea what we're doing for the most part. And that's not really a problem. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that, of course. Just like there's nothing wrong with not knowing why when you flip a switch, the light comes on. Like wine, you can enjoy music without having any specific skills or knowledge, which is, I mean, that's great. That's really fortunate for us. But like wine, and like everything else, knowledge is power. And the more you know, the more you can pinpoint what you really like, figure out under what conditions that music is most effective for you, and prime the pump for ever greater musical enjoyment. So that's what I want to try to do today. We're going to tramp through some various fields, some science, some music, some neuroscience. All of these fields require a lifetime of study to be an expert in, to really have a handle on them. I'm no expert, but I have spent my life making and recording music. Started playing guitar at about 9. I was always fascinated with the intersection of science and sound. And so that led me eventually to go to school for audio engineering, and I wound up in the music industry in Nashville, working in recording studios and on the road with bands. But I am going to rely pretty heavily on the work of some great scientists, David Huron, Elizabeth Helmuth-Margulis, Daniel Levitin, Nolan Gasser. Their books are incredible. If you want to learn more about the subject, I would recommend reading all of them. If you want a little bit more guidance on which one to start with, you can find me afterwards. We can talk about your interests. So first things first, what is music? For this, I'm going to ask, let's see, Seamus, I'm going to call you out. Do you mind to reprise maybe just a few lines of My Way from last night and maybe at the mic here for us? Well, you could come up if you'd like, or you can use the Q&A mic, either. Thank you. And we want to release some oxytocin, so if you know the song, sing it with them, okay?
First couple lines?
Yeah, just a few lines. We need to get some data on the table so we can figure out what music is. Okay. We ready with this QA mic? All right.
Testing. Okay. And now the end is near, and so I face the final curtain. My friends, I'll say it clear, I'll state my case, of which I'm certain. I've lived a life that's full. I've traveled each and every highway, and more, much more than this, I did it my way.
Beautiful. Thank you, Seamus. I have a prize for you. It's a pocket kalimba, 1,000 songs in your pocket. You just have to learn how to play it. All right, so, and this is not supposed to be a representation of Seamus, of course. This is just a stock photo. But what happened when Seamus was singing? Physically, mechanically, what happened? Well, most of us know the basics of this, right? Energy vibrated through air, reached our ears. There's some really interesting physiology that I'm happy to talk about in the Q&A. I don't want to bore everyone with science at this early in the morning, but the long and short of it, the thing that we need to know about what just happened is that when we listen to music, it causes synchronous neural firing in the brain. So perhaps a poetic way to put it would be that music actually plays the brain. It plays various brain structures. By sending these vibrations through various brain structures and causing them to synchronize. So this is really incredible. Scientists have actually put probes in the brains of people listening to music and re-recorded the music that they were listening to from their brains. That's amazing to me. It blows my mind. Perhaps you guys have heard the phrase, neurons that fire together wire together. And this is really important for music's effect on us, for understanding its effect on us and its ability to shape and improve our lives. Dr. Lee Bartell has done a lot of work in this field, and according to Bartell, brain regions that are operating at different brainwave frequencies do not speak to one another. They don't talk to one another. And when that happens, when brain regions don't talk to one another, really bad things happen. So for instance, two brain regions that are involved in motor processing don't talk to one another, what happens? People get dyskinesia, they can't move, or they get Parkinson's and they have tremors. Two brain regions that are associated with memory don't talk to one another, what happens? People get amnesia, dementia, Alzheimer's. And so what music can do is it can actually help jumpstart that conversation between brain regions and reverse the symptoms of Parkinson's, of dementia, of Alzheimer's. This is amazing. This is music. I mean, we just put it on for enjoyment, but it's actually medicine as well. I recently, about 2 weeks ago, I saw Paul McCartney at Fenway. That man is 80 years old. He turned 80 a few days after we saw him. Music keeps you young. I tell you, he's running around the stage, fireworks are going off, his voice is still incredibly strong. 2 years from now will be the 60th anniversary of the Beatles' debut on The Ed Sullivan Show. And he's still doing it. It's incredible. And a year before that, I saw John Williams conducting the Boston Symphony Orchestra. And he was 89 at the time. He's 90 now, and he's still doing it. It's incredible. But that requires certain, let's say, parameters. I want to look at something that flouts those parameters, that is really sort of the opposite of what we're talking about. This is a mathematically devised sequence of tones used in echolocation in submarines. And echolocation, the big technological problem is how do we send something out and know that what we're sending out is distinct from what we're getting back? So they have to mathematically devise a sequence of tones that lacks repetition in every parameter, okay? So this is Scott Rickard, a mathematician, introducing this submarine ping. Take a listen.
The point when you hear this music is not that it's supposed to be beautiful. This is supposed to be the world's ugliest piece of music. In fact, it's music that only a mathematician could write. So when you're listening to this piece of music, I implore you, try and find some repetition. Try and find something that you enjoy, and then revel in the fact that you won't find it, okay? So without further ado, Michael Linville, the director of chamber music at the New World Symphony, will perform the world premiere of The Perfect Ping.
All right, let's do it again. How many got chills from that one? Oh, we have one hand. Raj, we got chills from that. That's interesting. Oh, two. Okay, very interesting. So yeah, that one's going to the top of the charts any day now. The point is that this lacks repetition in every single musical parameter.
The point when you hear this music
How'd that happen?
is not that it's supposed to be beautiful.
Okay. And it lacks repetition in every parameter. What it really highlights is the fact that repetition is key to our understanding of music. If you think about a musical phrase or passage, the fact that it repeats, even with slight variation, demarcates a clear beginning and ending, which enables us to hear that as one unit, a sonic mental unit. So this fact of the necessity of repetition in music is really, really clarifying as to what music is. It's helping us toward our definition of music. It's funny how this works, too. Elizabeth Hellmuth-Margulis's book is called On Repeat, How Music Plays the Mind. And she talks in there about how even a simple nonsense phrase repeated in a rhythmic pattern, listen to that for 2-3 minutes and it actually starts to sound like music. And I was on the airplane coming here, and the flight attendant, I forget what she said, it was something like, pillows or alcohol, pillows or alcohol, pillows or alcohol. And the more she did it, the more it started to sound like music. I could hear in my mind's ear Kanye West like rapping over the top of it or something. So repetition is key to what music is. So I want to offer a sort of working definition of music, and I'm happy to hear criticism and have people poke holes in this. But this is sort of what I think music is right now. So sound organized into audible patterns giving rise to directly perceivable sonic entities. Sound organized into audible patterns giving rise to directly perceivable sonic entities. So, we know when Seamus was singing that there were patterns there. We could directly perceive those patterns. They were audible to us. If there are patterns that are mathematically devised that we cannot audibly perceive, then it doesn't matter that they're patterned, right? Music is a pattern that we can recognize audibly. This puts us in a better position, too, to understand how music conveys meaning. This little tour through music in the mind. Why is it that we have this incredibly complex auditory processor on top of our shoulders? Well, like every organ, every biological mechanism that we have, of course, its purpose is to keep us alive, so that when we hear a tiger crouching in the grass behind us or a boulder rolling down the canyon in front of us, we can respond, right? Keeps us alive. We can detect action in all directions, and the auditory system, unlike the visual system, is always on. It doesn't turn off. When you go to sleep at night, you can be woken up by auditory stimulus. This is an incredibly important biological function. So what is it that music conveys? If it's leveraging the same biological structures that enable us to detect action in the environment around us, what is it that music conveys? Does anyone have a guess? Okay, it's a hard one. Did I cut someone off? Emotion. Very common answer. Wrong. No, I'm just kidding. So according to, and I'm still grappling with this theory myself, but I think it has a lot of weight. According to Professor David Berry at Converse College, music conveys action itself. And this is really interesting because we know metaphysically that there can be no action without an actor. Yet with music, we hear action abstracted from anyone taking the action, right? We just hear a stylized representation of action itself, abstracted from any actor. If this is true, it would explain the universal link between music and dance. We hear some sonic representation of action, and we want to complement or act that out, either well, like Kira, who will be giving the salsa lesson tonight, or very poorly, like me, who you'll see at the closing banquet if you come. It would also explain why when we let ourselves be carried along with music, we close our eyes and just let us take us away, we experience something like Disney's Fantasia. Our minds suggest entities taking the actions, maybe not even full-on entities, maybe just little pieces of light flying here and there. I know we have a lot of young people. If you haven't seen Fantasia, Please do. It's a beautiful, beautiful flick. We also do something very much like this all the time in non-musical context. Suppose you're in an apartment building. You're sitting at your desk, and you hear a door slam, and you hear steps walking down the hall. You can tell that they're high heels, and you can hear a voice. It's kind of high-pitched. Already, you have no idea you haven't seen the entity taking the actions, but just the sonic representation that you're getting is enough to imply the entity taking the actions, right? So we know, for instance, from the slamming of the door, we know something about the psychological state, the psychological action that is accompanying that physical action, the emotions and the mood that is fueling that physical action. We know something about the entities acting. We can probably tell from that something about the material that the door is made from. We can tell from the sound of the high heels that probably female, and then the timbre of the voice, the pitch of the voice, probably confirms that for us, maybe tells us something about the emotional state of the person. So we have all these indicators, and from that, we're able to discern something about the entity taking the action. And I think it's pretty easy to see how composers could leverage these various parameters in musical contexts. So just to get really literal for a second, a composer who wanted to score that scene in a stylized way could give us like a nice long violin wail. And then we could have some percussion, maybe a kick drum and a snare drum that represent the slamming door and the high heels. But of course, musicians and composers are not confined to such literal representations of physical actions. Over the centuries, they've devised many musical mechanisms for conveying action in ways that we cannot do in physical contexts, in non-musical contexts. And they've even figured out how to convey psychological action, typically using the beautiful harmonies that they can put together and the rhythms. We hear a fast beat. You know, your workout music in the morning gets your brain moving to that fast rhythm, and it gets you moving. And it does something to your psychological state and says something about psychological action. A really common example of music conveying action shows us that one of the ways that it can do so in a stylized form is it can foreshorten the amount of time it takes to communicate an action. So a summer storm, for instance, might take 20 minutes to pass, but Beethoven in his Pastoral Symphony does it in about 2 minutes. He's able to foreshorten the time. Let's take a listen. My wife and I took a trip to Salzburg a few years ago, the birthplace of Mozart. We took a conducting class at the academy there. It was a one-time thing, an Airbnb experience, but it was really fun. I don't remember any of it, though, so I can't conduct for you guys. And it conveys psychological action, as I was saying a minute ago. So what happens in our minds might seem somewhat static, like a mood. That's a noun. It seems like a static thing. But really what it is an evaluation of a series of things that are going on in our lives. An emotion is typically an evaluation of a single thing that we're experiencing in our lives. So these are psychological actions. So we can see how this action explanation can play out and explain many of the things that would be difficult to explain by some theories of how music conveys meaning. And if music conveys action, it also explains how different people can hear the same sonic qualities, but have vastly different evaluations, just as people can see the same actions and have vastly different evaluations. If you're rooting for one team in the Stanley Cup and not the other, then you're going to feel a certain emotion. So your evaluation of actions depend on your values and your context. The rough equivalent of your team affinity or your team affiliation in the realm of art is what Ayn Rand called sense of life. Sense of life. I think sense of life itself conveys a lot about what it is, but to paraphrase Rand's definition, it's an emotional, subconsciously integrated view of man in existence, an appraisal of man in existence. So we've all known people that are incredibly sour. It doesn't matter what they do, doesn't matter how good things are in their lives, nothing can ever seem to go right for them, right? And then we know other people that are absolutely bomb-proof. Doesn't matter what happens, they might have some fluctuations in their mood, but they always come back to their stable point there. And the pain, to paraphrase Rand again, only goes down so deep, right? They're very stable. So these are different senses of life. If you think that life is a Shakespearean tragedy and we're all doomed to pursue dreams that we can never actually attain, then you're going to have a greater affinity to music that expresses that view. If you believe deep down that life is wonderful and that your dreams are yours to achieve, then you're going to have a much greater affinity with music that portrays that, and so on and so forth for every shade and variety in between. So does this tell us then that some music is just definitively good and some is just rotten? Does it? Getting to the moral questions here. Well, we can certainly assess two recordings and ask, does one require more skill to perform and compose? And we can make aesthetic evaluations that way. But I think that the standard for judging what to listen to in our lives is the same standard that we use for judging any other actions we will take. What to listen to depends on your life and your flourishing. So the questions to ask are, is listening to this going to help me achieve my life-serving goals? Or is it going to predispose me to thoughts and actions that are actually bad for my life? So I'm not suggesting that if I Like Big Butts comes on the radio and you start singing along with it, that you're definitely going to be a misogynist or a skank. I'm not suggesting that if you like the song Last Resort by Papa Roach, that means you're going to definitively commit suicide, right? The first studies that I know of, at least, that tried to link your listening to your behavior came out after Tipper Gore's campaign in Congress to get parental advisory stickers put on albums. And they painted this really grim picture of the connection, this link between what you listen to and how you think and act. Well, the studies in the decades since largely have failed to replicate these results, and at this point, many scientists think that these results have been debunked. In any case, stats don't override our free will. This is what Craig was talking about. It doesn't matter what the stats say. We each have the choice to determine how we're going to respond to a particular piece of music. And we each have the responsibility to ask ourselves whether or not listening to this song, this album, this genre is good for our lives or bad for it. And really, we're the only ones in the driver's seat to know. But we also shouldn't throw out any link between what we listen to and what we feel. As we've seen, what we listen to has tremendous, measurable psychological, physiological effects on us. According to Audio-Technica, a company that makes high-end audio products, we spend 12 to 13 years of our lives listening to music. And I hope more for me and all of us here, especially after this talk. But we should keep in mind the psychologist's observation that our environment can have a big impact on how we view the world and how we act. Many say that environment, over time, can be more impactful than what you just choose and will to do. Of course, this doesn't override free will, but it does inform how we ought to think about what we listen to. We should choose our musical friends wisely, right? We want musical friends, the artists that we go to for inspiration, for motivation. We want those people to be saying, yes, you can, and here's how. Not, no, you can't, and here's why, right? From 3rd to 8th grade, listened to almost nothing but Metallica. I could listen to 5 Metallica albums back to back and be perfectly happy. That was my thing. And, over time, I added in a little Godsmack and a little Stained and a little Slipknot. I was kind of a metalhead. And I would listen to this stuff on the school bus, on the way to school. And I would get to school, and what do you think happened? Do you think that I saw things on the bright side when something wasn't going my way, when I got dumped or this or that? Now, as John Wass was talking about Pity Party last night, I couldn't help but observe the connection between that openness to the negative. What happens when you prime the pump with negatives is that you see more of them, right? So I still love Metallica, and I plan to go see them as soon as possible before they fall off the map. But, I'm someone that thinks that we ought to have a good balance between the serious and the silly, as you can tell from my outfit today. This is a rock lobster, by the way. But the problems arise when we take the silly seriously, and that's all we take seriously. That's when the problems really arise. So and we have to consider also that even beyond the lyrics that we might take some inspiration, some suggestion, some advice from throughout our lives, even beyond that, we have to keep in mind those physiological effects of the music. And, use it in the doses that you think are fit. Music can alter our view of the world. I want to do another quick experiment. I want you to watch this video. Think about what you're seeing, what's happening, and how it makes you feel. Right. I planned that one really poorly because now everyone's falling asleep, but I have the antidote. Let's watch it again, but with a different soundtrack. Keep in mind, again, same thing. What are you seeing? What do you think's happening? And how does it make you feel? You get the idea, right? A little different that time? Just a little bit different. So music can alter our view of the world. This was what was happening to me on the way to school, on the school bus in the mornings. It was altering my view of the world. It slants our consciousness, in Rand's words. It makes everything appear a little bit differently, right? But we ought to keep in mind before we go out moralizing about music that the opposite is also true. What we're viewing, our context when we're perceiving the world, vastly changes the musical meanings of what we're listening to. So, to demonstrate that, let's hear the same music with a slightly different video. Keep in mind this time, again, what's happening, how does it make you feel? Let's go with that. Ooh, that was interesting, wasn't it? Okay, so I have 2 questions. Don't preempt my second one by answering the first one with the second answer. So first, did the emotional meaning of that music change for you from the last video to this one? Yes. Did it change for you between the beginning of that video and the end of that video? It did, didn't it? Isn't that interesting? So the emotional meaning of music can be vastly different depending on the associations that we make with it. Quick story, my wife and I, last time we came to Colorado, we landed at Eagle Vale Airport. We're eager to start our adventure. We got there and everybody in the world was there trying to get a rental car, and we were behind them. So we had to wait hour and a half to get in a rental car. When we finally got it, we were so pleased to be mobile again, to go start our adventure, that we needed the right song to kick things off. And neither of us really care for the song that we picked usually, right? But it made sense in the context, and we repurposed it for our context. That song was Freedom 90 by George Michael, and you know the chorus, right? You're singing it yourself right now. Freedom. Yeah. We were free again to get back on the road and get started on our adventure. And so that piece of music has a specific context for us. Now, every time we get a rental car, wherever we travel, it's the first thing that we play. We made a little routine out of it, a little tradition. So the point, though, is that music can change our view of the world, and our view of the world, including what we happen to be viewing when we hear the music, can change our view of the music. It goes both ways. So we can debate who's better, Jimi Hendrix, Stevie Ray Vaughan, Stevie is, Beatles, Rolling Stones, Mozart, Beethoven, Eminem, Jay-Z. I don't know, what do you guys listen to? We can debate that stuff, and it's good to consider the reasons for other people's artistic preferences. We can learn things from them. Maybe we'll find something that we didn't know we were missing. But we should also be conscious of the fact that the purposes for which people listen to music, the things they associate with that music, the things that attract them to it, are often uniquely individual. And we ought to honor that uniqueness both for them and for ourselves. Regardless of what you listen to, though, there are some great scientific finds that can help you get even more out of it. So let's talk about developing your musical mind and ways to increase your enjoyment from listening to music. Why do we experience chills when Mary Clayton sings that incredible background vocal in Gimme Shelter? And especially when her voice cracks, that for me is the point where I just melt. It's incredible. So David Huron has proposed this theory. He calls it that music leverages the biology of pessimism. It's better, biologically speaking, to respond to 1,000 false alarms than it is to miss one actual instance of danger. Because we know what happens when you miss that one instance. So, music leverages this. We have different pathways of processing information in our brains. We have slow pathways and fast pathways. And most things access both. All things, I think, access both. So music, literally, one of the first things that hits when it goes into the brain is the amygdala, which is the emotional processing center of the brain. It goes directly to our emotions. If you've ever heard anyone say that, that's literally true. But it also then goes to the auditory cortex, where a lot of the magic happens, and we later come out with an appraisal. If our initial response to the music is that it violates our expectation, well, violating our expectation, biologically speaking, is always bad, because we fail to predict something, then we get eaten, or a rock falls on us. So we get an initial tension, and often with that, a release of endogenous opiates. You know, same drug you can buy out there on the street, probably in Colorado, but in your body, we get this injection of opiates. But then our appraisal reaction, our slow brain reactions, oh, actually I'm not being harmed here, I'm not in any danger. In fact, this feels quite pleasant. And when you get the flood of opiates and no actual danger, boom, you have this whole new experience. So, music that violates our expectations, that can help us get that chill effect more often. When you increase the volume, you actually increase the physiological arousal level, which increases that ability to feel that chill sensation. And this one is less obvious. If you decrease the temperature, there's actually a correlation between being colder and feeling that chill response more. So on that hot summer day when you're cranking Freedom 90 by George Michael, crank the AC so that you can feel it a little bit more. Musical pleasure also follows the Wundt curve. And Scientists don't know exactly why, but they know that this is true, and most of us know that this is true from our experience. It's that when we first hear something, typically it's not our favorite. A few more listens in, oh, now we're at peak pleasure. Over time, we kind of wear it out, kind of loses its impact. And Huron proposes that the reason for this is that as we listen, we increase our predictive accuracy of how that song will unfold. So when the drum fill for Colin in the Air Tonight comes in and you can like hit that thing perfectly and you're just jamming along with the music, you're at like peak performance, you're at peak predictive accuracy and you're just loving it. But over time it gets a little boring, right? So what do we need to do to prolong musical enjoyment? Something probably many of us do without really knowing the science behind it already, which is, well, when you get to that level where you're just jamming on air guitar and you know like the whole solo, you can play it in Rock Band or whatever, set it aside for a bit. Put it at the back of the shelf, put it at the back of your playlist, come back to it a little while later and prolong that love affair with that piece of music. Also, typically that curve tends to be a bit longer with music that's more complex. One of my favorite pieces of music is called The Way Up by Pat Metheny. And it's this like 60-minute jazz orchestration, but it's totally listenable. It's beautiful music. And I've listened to it dozens of times, and I still get chills here and there from it, and it still moves me immensely. It's incredibly complex, and the two things correlate. They make sense. So more variety as well, so that we can hit more peaks. So, explore that musical landscape. Maybe you'll like Hawaiian slack key music. Maybe you'll like Brazilian bossa nova. Maybe you'll like Balinese gamelan music. You don't know it until you try it. Another thing we can do is actively bolster our anticipation. We want to feel that same whet appetite as if we were waiting for that cupcake. And how do we do that? Well, we have to be thinking about the song before we hear the part, not thinking consciously in concepts, thinking about, oh, well, it's this many beats away, and then I do this downbeat, and then I go to the snare, things like that. No, but like picturing it almost in your mind's ear. Picturing it and anticipating it and feeling it. Imagining the parts and inviting the music to play you. I saw people doing this last night at karaoke. They were getting into it. They're dancing. That's great. That activates those reward circuits in the brain, and you'll get more out of the music doing that. I also recommend building your musical memory. Musical memory is something that nobody really talks about, but everybody knows we have it because we all experience earworms, where you hear a chorus of a song, maybe it's one you don't even like, and you can't get it out of your head. It just keeps repeating and repeating and repeating. This relies on musical memory. But musical memory is a skill that we can build, it's a muscle that we can build to Olympian standards, regardless of where you start. It's easier if you're younger, of course. But you can build your musical memory, which will help you anticipate that music and get more out of it. This is actually a hallmark of the musical mind. If you think about it, think about Beethoven, for instance. He wrote some of his greatest music when he was deaf. How did he do that? Because he had incredible musical memory and musical imagery in his head, and he was able to compose without even hearing it. And we can all take advantage of greater musical memory to get more pleasure out of music. So how do we do that? How do we increase our musical memory? A few tips on this. Learn in chunks. So this is going to sound really weird. I love listening to music track after track, put on a playlist. It's fun. I do that all the time. That's one purpose for listening to music. Another purpose is if I want to conscientiously try to build my musical memory, this is one thing you can do. So listen to 30 seconds of a song, and pause. And the reason for this is that musical memory relies on what's called echoic memory, which is very, very short-term memory, easily overwritten by the next thing that you hear. So if you're just trying, especially if you're just starting out trying to build your musical memory, you want to start small. So chunk it. Listen to 30 seconds, press pause, hear that back in your mind's ear. Okay? Next thing, which is kind of a variation of this, but sit with the song. I like to do this. You listen to the song, you press pause, and you just sit there and let it sort of reverberate in your mind's ear. Just hear it as much as you can. Hear it as vividly as you can. Think about this. If you were stranded on a desert island tomorrow and you could never listen to music again, how vividly could you imagine in your mind's ear your favorite music. Imagine being able to hear it in incredible detail, such that you could tell if somebody changed the tempo a little bit, or the pitch a little bit, or the room reverberation a little bit. Wouldn't that be incredible? So if you sit with a song, you can start building that. These first two have to do with making our minds more impressionable, but another tactic is to make the impressions themselves more impressive. Get great sound. Invest in good sound. I could talk about this subject all day long. If you guys want like concrete suggestions on what turntable to buy, what speakers to get, I'll geek out with you all over that. Let's talk about that. But if you get great sound, for instance, my wife and I just bought a turntable and some great bookshelf speakers, and we're hearing parts in the music that we never even heard before. I didn't even know that vocal part was there. Listen to that drum fill. It's like panned across the whole stereo. It's incredible. So greater musical impressions can increase that feeling and just help you remember that music. Lastly on this topic is link music to specific experiences. So my wife is my adventure partner, and every time we go on an adventure, we try to pick some new music that will make a good soundtrack for that adventure. And it doesn't have to be literally new like it just came out last week. It just has to be new to us. So what happens is the music enhances the experience enhances the music. When I think of the time I was at that place, that song comes to mind. When I hear that song, that place comes to mind. The two are like mnemonically linked, so to speak, in my mind. And I get a much greater ability to leverage that musical memory. You can also reverse this. You can pick up music from your locations wherever you go to travel. So we did this recently. We just went to Italy, had this amazing dinner. And part of the reason it was so amazing was because the chef put as much thought into the ingredients of the atmosphere, including the music, as he did his food. And so all night long, and I'm always this guy anyway, but all night long I was like, hey Siri, what song is this? Hey Siri, what song is this? And I built the entire playlist that we heard. And now half a world away, we can relive that night, right? We can try to make some of the food. We're not going to get there, but the music, though, we got that. One more variation of this. If you go to a great concert, take down the set list, or maybe afterward go to setlist.fm and rebuild that playlist in your music library and relive that night. I like to do this in my phone because then I can take geeky notes about what guitar was being used, what amp, what effects, things like that, because I like to geek out about that gear stuff. But all of these are tactics just for increasing your musical memory, and I think musical memory is key to many of the things that we've been talking about today. So, music is an incredibly potent life enhancer. Explore the musical landscape, find new peaks, live your best life, and do it with great music. But remember that music is the friend that you turn to in times when things get tough. So choose friends that confirm your view of life, that are good for you, that will cushion your fall, not push you down. Thank you. Oh, good, Georgie.
So I wanted to ask a little bit about the music taste of objectivist thinkers. So we know a little bit about what Ayn Rand's music taste was. We definitely know more about what Leonard Peikoff was, and he's given talks on certain genres like the operetta and stuff like that. But it seems like objectivists tend to kind of stay away from rock and roll.
Come on, there's Rush. How many people here are here because of Rush
yeah.
originally?
Yeah, I mean,
Okay.
we have rock and roll albums that we know were inspired by Ayn Rand, but I don't know of many instances of objectivist thinkers talking about, at least in the past, at least Rand and Peikoff, about rock and roll. Why do you think that is? Do you think it's because of like the high bar that objectivist aesthetics put on what art should be, or is it because of kind of questionable politics by the average rock star?
Yeah, I get your question.
Yeah. So it's a B-52's lobster, not a Jordan Peterson lobster on your shirt, right?
Yeah, it's a rock lobster. It's a rock lobster. Let's get that right. I think there has been a lot of unhealthy dogmatism about what is good and bad music, and that's actually a big part of why I wanted to give this talk. to clarify that context makes this huge difference in what your musical tastes are and ought to be. And I don't think you should listen to people that say, well, this is the only good music. Not implying that that's exactly what happens, but yeah, I think there has been some snobbery about what is good and bad. And I think that really what it comes down to is, again, that same question. What I want to listen to is what will bolster my life and help me achieve life-enhancing goals, not knock me down in my process to do so. So I don't know if that's fully satisfactory, but I do want to, we have a long line here. Thank you, Georgie. We can talk more about this. Hi, Maria.
Hey, John, this was such a great talk. Thank you so much for doing it. I love these kinds of talks that really go into what it is that's out there that we could really take advantage of to make our lives better. So music is a huge part of my life. You know, I can't sit still when I hear music. So you guys will see that tonight. But I wanted to ask you if you've heard of a compilation of 715 songs. It's a playlist that's scientifically verified to give you the chills.
Oh, that's so cool. I haven't heard of that.
Check
Can you
your
share
phone.
with me?
You've got it. It's
Okay.
in your messages.
Oh, you rock. Thank you.
On
And
Spotify.
we'll put that on the, I'll
Yeah.
post it somewhere and everyone can have access to that.
Thank you so
That's
much.
beautiful.
Awesome
Thank you,
speech.
Marina. Hey, Tom.
Hey, John. I had a couple other questions that I jotted down for you that maybe we'll get to later, but one I wanted to get into in particular was something that I feel like you kind of touched on maybe a couple times, which is when you're building playlists for any particular purpose, do you have any tendencies to put the songs in a particular order rather than just put together a mix that you can just
Oh,
turn on
yeah.
yourself?
Well, working in the music industry and just growing up listening to albums, you know that album sequencing is so incredibly important. And so, yeah, I've got like a workout playlist, for instance, that starts with actually a couple U2 songs because they're just so upbeat and energetic that I have to hear those first. And then I can go into like some Muse or something like that, but I've got to hear those ones first. So to answer your question, yeah, I think sequencing is really important. I don't know that I have any specific advice on how to sequence. I think it really depends on your purpose and your context.
Awesome.
So,
Thanks.
yep. Hey, Carrie Ann.
Hey, John. I'm wondering what you think about the relationship between lyrics and music, because this is really focused on the sonic part. There's some music that if I just heard it, I just don't like it at all. It doesn't grab me. But if I read the lyrics or hear somebody singing the lyrics, and I'm like, philosophically, those lyrics are awesome, then I love the song and I can get used to the music. So you've spoken so much on the sound and how that moves you, but I think I'm more of a lyrics person.
I
and I'm
love
wondering
lyrics.
What is the relationship between the two? And that's my
Yeah, I
question.
can give you my thoughts on this. We were actually talking about this, me, Thomas, Angel, the other night. I think it's a really interesting question. I think obviously the voice does act as an instrument itself, and all the things that we talked about apply. But when you add into that equation lyrics, that gives you a conceptual element. And of course, we know that concepts can convey much more and more precisely than simply vibrations. Well, they communicate differently. Let's put it that way. In certain respects, some music obviously communicates much more than just words alone can. But that conceptual layer, I mean, think about what happened in that video with the tank when you saw Ukraine. I mean, that completely changes your conception of what's going on there. And I think that it's often what happens with lyrics. So I think that lyricists are some of the greatest and sometimes most underrated poets. Thank you.
Hi, thanks for the talk. I also have quite a few questions, but I think I'll start with one addressing the first slide of your presentation. I found it interesting that you started with a representation of a song that was described by the artist as virtually the Communist Manifesto.
Oh, I didn't actually know that. Bad me. Thank you. Do you know the painting?
No, I didn't know that painting. It's actually a beautiful painting, but that's not my question. My question is, it's also regarding lyrics. What do you think the extent is of lyrics on the influence of a person's perception? For example, specifically relating to that song, Imagine, it's one of the most repeated songs throughout history. It's number one in almost all the charts. So through repetition and hearing what is described as virtually the Communist Manifesto, what is the influence that can have on an individual's perception?
Significant, I think. And I think that this is a huge under-leveraged piece of fighting for freedom, is using music. Look at Rage Against the Machine. I loved Rage Against the Machine when I was young, and then I grew up and like learned what the lyrics meant, and I was like, oh shit. So actually, my friend and I recorded a song recently called Jab, and the lyrics, if I can recall, are something like, give me your ear, give me your arm, and don't you ask why. Get the jab or lose your job and sink your whole life. And I think that, especially if you can do it and leverage, you'll be hearing from Amala later, leverage social media well, create little short, maybe satirical pieces of music that have a positive or politically positive message to tell, that can have a huge effect on people. And I think I'd be really interested to find out if anyone's done a survey to find out how many people came to the left through Imagine, but actually I'm more curious about Rage Against the Machine because I think that is more current. And now that you say that, I do put that together. The point for me of that painting is not the political content, it's the art itself. It's the, not to get too in the weeds here, but like the female body as an instrument like that, I think that's interesting tie-in, and it's just beautiful to me. By the way, thank you for asking the question because you gave me the opportunity to mention that that's Imagine by Michael Chevall, an American realist painter, and if you are interested in seeing more of his work, you can go to chevalfineart.com. I do want to just keep it to one question. Do you have a quick follow-up? Because we only have a few minutes.
I have several. I'll catch you later.
Yes,
Thank you very
let's do
much.
that. Hey, James.
Hey, thanks for the innovative talk. M. Zachary Johnson has you thought this would come up. So he has a talk, or he has a book that offers a different theory of why music affects us the way that it does. And my quick and brutal way of saying what his theory is that it makes our minds run at a certain speed.
I think that's totally consistent with what I'm talking about, actually.
Okay, that's what I was going to ask. Would you compare and contrast it in further
really
detail?
quickly.
Yeah.
So makes your mind run at a certain speed. Well, what you're hearing is, it's a conveyance of a stylized representation of action, both physical and psychological. But we know from earlier in my talk that music plays the brain. So what is it doing while you're thinking about that music? It's literally synchronous neural firing in your brain. So it is making your mind run at a certain speed. It's doing it by conveying action, and is the action that you're actually experiencing as well. So good tie-in, thank you.
Cool, thanks.
Seamus.
Hello.
Another hand for Seamus, please.
Thank you. So I'm sure no one's surprised. I listen to music constantly, but sometimes I feel like my musical diet, I'm not eating my veggies because I tend to just play the hits over and over and over. And so I wanted to ask you, what is a good strategy for discovering new music, and how much do you work that in, and how much patience do you have to acquire the taste for it?
Oh man, you want me to teach you anything about music? You've got it in your bones. Well, there's the obvious ones, Apple Music, Pandora, Spotify. But you know how many bands I had never heard of, and I just accidentally saw them in concert and they blew my mind? And then I pulled up the record and it was like, oh my God, this recording is terrible. I'm kind of a snob about recording quality because of my background as a recording engineer. So another great way to do this, it might seem a little foolish in terms of expense, but like go to music festivals, or even just pay for a ticket to go see a concert that you have no idea what you're gonna hear. Do it, because as good as a recording can be, it can never move air physically in the same way that a live band can. It's never gonna sound the same. I just saw Dave Matthews like a week ago, and there's this song that he opened with that I would, if I heard it on the record, that's pretty good. Oh my God, it just like almost left me in tears. It was so good when I heard it live. And so just that live musical experience, I think, is another way to explore new music. Thank you, Seamus.
Thank you.
One more question, and unfortunately we have to end this thing. But I'll catch the rest of you in the hallway, I hope.
So my question has to deal, you talked about the benefits of music neurologically for your emotions and all that kind of stuff. And I wanted to ask you specifically if you could go deeper into You talked a little bit about like with workouts and all that kind of stuff. I've noticed on my morning runs, my headphones are dead, and it's been a slog getting through it. Whenever I'm listening to specific music, I can just run farther, faster, get more lifting out of it. And I just wanted to know, is there anything specifically scientific that you know that deals with that, and if there's any specific types of music that you would recommend to get the most bang out of your buck workout?
Yeah, I think once you take that music conveys action analogy seriously or description seriously, then it almost becomes obvious which is going to work, because like faster action going to move your brain faster, and it's going to make you work out faster. So typically things with higher tempos are going to work. That's an obvious one. Intensity. There are things related to study music and things like that, but scientifically, I think the thing to do is just to take that music conveys action thing and run with it and just see how much mileage you can get out of that. Thanks so much for the questions, guys.
I hope you enjoyed that, and I invite you to join us for Level Up 2023 in Phoenix, Arizona, June 21 through 24. Speakers include Barry Weiss, Timothy Sandifer, Eric Daniels, and many more voices of reason. For information and to register, visit levelupconferences.org or click the link below. See you in Phoenix.